Hello everybody, welcome back to Norwich Talk for the second part of Keep, Loan or Sell. If you watched the previous video, thank you very much. If you didn't, well, you don't have to go and watch it before this, but make sure you go and watch that. As I described in that video, this is a very simple game of me going through Norwich City's players and deciding whether, in an ideal world, I would like to keep, loan or sell them. Today is going to be a much shorter video. The list of midfielders I have is considerably shorter than the defence and the attack. Now, the way I've done this, as a quick disclaimer, is I've gone for kind of central midfielders. Now, on Norwich City's website, they include players like Christos Scholes and Rashica as midfielders, but I have them down as attackers because they're wingers. So that list is a little bit longer. This list is a little bit shorter. That said, let's start on a very straightforward player, Isaac Hayden. I put him there basically to avoid confusion. I wanted the existing squad, which includes Isaac Hayden, so that's why he's there. Obviously keep, duh. Next player, Jacob Sorensen. Now, I feel like I could quite easily have just said, well, he's not been particularly fancied by two managers in his natural position, so get rid. But I'm going to say keep on the basis of in the Championship. I think having him as maybe a backup or even a starter is a wonderful option. We've only seen sort of glimpses of him in his natural central midfield position. As a left-back in the Championship, he was rock solid. And in the Premier League, he was a bit hit or miss, I think. I remember the Watford game, I remember the Everton game. He looked decent in the Watford game before he got injured. The Everton game, he was, I think, in my opinion, was really, really good. Looked really comfortable, never looked too phased on the ball. And I think in the Championship, that could be quite important, especially playing next to someone maybe like Isaac Hayden, who can put in the dirty tackles that we're expecting maybe from Sorensen. And Sorensen's distribution is usually not too spectacular, but it's always quite clever, it's always quite sensible, which in the middle of the park isn't a bad thing, really, is it? So I'd like to keep Jacob Sorensen. PLS Malou is going to be a keep because when he sort of went into that number 10 role towards the back end of last season, he did resemble, as many people said, Marco Stiefman in terms of the non-generic build of being quite lanky, quite tall, quite thin and mobile and clever on the ball. He wasn't a world beater, but in the Championship you don't really need to be a world beater. He's a hard worker and he's always very willing on the ball, which I think would get him far in the Championship. So I'm not too fussed about that. I think in terms of having him as a Championship option, it's the same as Sorensen. I think it's quite a good thing. Kenny McLean is going to be a keep. Not just because he signed, I think, a 3 or 4 year contract a season or two ago, but again, in the Championship where the emphasis on ability is sort of lessened as to the Premier League. I think his hard work, his ability in the air, his willingness to carry the ball will get him far. Last time we were in the Championship, he was either really, really good or really, really bad. I think it was kind of 70-30, 70 in terms of him being very good. We know what McLean has to offer, and at a Championship level, I don't think it's a bad option. I'm really sitting on, well, not sitting on the fence, but I'm kind of saying the same thing about the players here. Kieran Doherty is a keep for me. Last time in the Championship had a really, really positive ending to the season. I think he was a bit unlucky with injuries and then the emergence of Todd Cantwell. But he came back into the team, didn't he? And that left foot was very dangerous. It took him a little bit to get going, but his movement, I thought, was always clever. And in terms of the end product, he did up his game. I think he scored 5 or 6 goals, didn't he? And he scored that free kick against Derby. So, having that option in terms of set-piece specialist or someone who's half decent at set-pieces brings sort of another dynamic to this Norwich City team, especially with Alan Russell coming in. And, I think he'll be delighted to be working with someone like Kieran Doherty, who has got a good delivery. Left-footed as well, sort of brings that versatility in a very sort of predominantly right-footed team. I think Kieran Doherty, at a good age as well, I think he could be good for Norwich City. And I don't really know why, but I'm filled with giddy optimism about Dow. I'm not too sure why. I think there is also that sense around the Norwich City fan base. I get that vibe from Twitter in terms of the support for Kieran Dow. So yeah, fingers crossed he can have a good season. I think he will. Todd Cantwell is a sell for me. I've made my opinions on Todd Cantwell very clear. We're going through the motions for what, the 4th or 5th time now. Is there a Todd Cantwell comeback on the cards? No, there isn't. I don't think it's going to happen. I would love it to happen. I've absolutely nothing against the guy. personally. It's just, over the past few seasons, it's been just such a circus, hasn't it? We didn't see anything from him last season. I know he was in and out of the team. He had that sort of rough spell. But based off last season in a Norwich City shirt, and maybe even a Bournemouth shirt as well, there's nothing to write home about. And then the season before, only half of it he played, because again at the beginning of that season we were running around going on about whether he wants to be here. Again, that word circus is what it was. And then in the Premier League, I think maybe the hype got to him a bit, where he was decent, like he was pretty good, but the rest of the team was so poor, and that emphasised his level of performance, if you will. But I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered with that. In a game where characters are so important, I'm not sure Cantwell is strong enough to lead Norwich City in terms of the way that I think people would need and would expect for a guy who's been at the club and played as many games as him. The final player, Cernani, is going to be a keep. I think he's going to feel like a fresh signing. He's going to feel like a championship signing. He's got a season of championship football under his belt. I think it's sort of well documented the back half of that season was the better half for Cernani. I think it was a pretty successful season for Huddersfield. When I watched them in Norwich's title-winning season and we beat them 7-0, I kind of thought, right, where is this Huddersfield team going? But then they got in the playoffs, and they lost in the final, didn't they, to Bournemouth? I should really know that, but he looked decent. I remember watching him against Luton in the first leg of the playoff semi-final, and I kind of watched that thinking, right, I'm going to keep my eye on you because I'm interested to see what happens. And in terms of his movement, he kind of seems like your number 8 or number 6 will pick it up and he'll just bolt. That is the kind of player that I think he is. In terms of his natural position, whether he's a 10 or a striker, I don't know. I don't really think it matters. If it's going to work, it's going to work. He seems like a player who's always wanting to score goals, which can't go wrong with that, really. You have to shoot to score. And I think in this Norwich City team, there is enough creativity. Someone like Kieran Doherty, Les Malou, even McLean at times will have that creativity. And that's just ignoring the wide men to create the chances. But they're my thoughts on the midfield. In terms of the midfield as a whole, there's been a bit of an overhaul, really, hasn't there, in the sense of Lucas Rupp has been released, Billy Gilmore, Matthias Norman have gone back. They were 3 players who played a fair bit. Lucas Rupp maybe not as much as Norman and Gilmore. But yeah, they're my thoughts on the midfield. I'm not too disheartened by the current state of the midfield in terms of, at a championship level. Again, in an ideal world, Norwich City would be stripped bare and rebuilt from the bottom up, but you can't do that and expect to be promoted, sadly. We know, it would be a dream, wouldn't it? But we know that's just not realistic. It's not plausible, as is the sort of current state of Norwich City. But yeah, as I said, for now, the third time, they're my thoughts on the midfield. Your thoughts, I would love to know them in the comments down below. A thumbs up on the video would be appreciated as ever. If you want to subscribe too, that would be wonderfully appreciated. So I will see you again in the next one.